Welcome, dear listeners, poets, and friends, to the first episode of Poems and Potions. And to start things off right, we're going to speak with Dr. Vernell Bristow. Vernell is a poet, writer, educator, and student living in central Ohio. She wrote her first poem a very long time ago, she stipulates, while a student at Denison University. Her writings have appeared in several anthologies, and she has edited 2 books of poetry by other poets. Vernell has been an integral part of the Columbus poetry scene for the past 25 years as a poet and a poetry event organizer. She is a co-founder of Writer's Block Poetry, a weekly open mic poetry night operated for over 24 years, providing one of the region's best known and celebrated poetry venues. Currently, Vernell spends all of her available time pursuing a doctoral degree at Methodist Theological School in Delaware, Ohio. She also spends a considerable amount of time keeping her adorable beagle, Diogi, from getting into everything.
All right. Well, here we are at our very first, very first, the inaugural podcast for Poems and Potions. I want to say welcome. Tonight, our guest is Vernell Bristow, and we are so excited to have this talk with her. I'm Marquita Byers, and then Ryan, tell the people who you are.
I'm Ryan, R. Taryn Lear.
And there's Ryan. I'm just going to jump right in. And we want to start with you telling us your story, like how you're from Cincinnati. You came up to go to the Ohio State University. And also you were pledging to a sorority, Delta Sigma Theta. Delta Sigma Theta. At the same time for school. So tell us about how your poetry journey in Columbus began.
Okay, first let me go ahead and say it because people that I know from Cincinnati will call me out if I don't make the correction. I'm not from Cincinnati. I am Cincinnati adjacent.
Okay.
I was born in Hamilton, Ohio. I grew up in Covington, Kentucky. So
got you. I know Hamilton, Ohio. One of my best friends is from Hamilton.
Okay, wonderful. And I grew up in Covington, Kentucky.
Okay.
And so, now that my sister and my mom both live in Cincinnati, so I talk about going to Cincinnati a lot because that's where I go when I go visit, or when I say I'm going home is wherever my mama is. So that is it. So yes. So that's where I grew up. I graduated from high school. Shout out to Holmes High School in Covington, Kentucky. And then I went to college straight away at Denison University in Granville, Ohio. And did my 4 years there, bachelor's degree, and then came to Columbus. I came to Columbus to go to graduate school at Ohio State. Thought I would be in the city for 1 year, maybe a year and a half, and then move on. But I've been here ever since. And I've been here for like it's that in Columbus for like over 25 years. So thought I would be here for 1 year. I was just gonna go. I got my first master's degree in a year. I was gonna just get it and be out, but I ended up staying. And more college came after that, more education came after. But I wrote my first poem when I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore in college. It was a kind of a spiritual type of thing. It's like poetry chose me. I didn't choose poetry. I was sitting in a class, in a nutshell, sitting in a class on Africa. It was called Introduction to Modern Africa. And I'm listening to the professor lecture about his latest visit to Africa. And these thoughts came to me that didn't really have anything to do with his lecture, but was kind of, some feelings about the motherland. So I wrote them in the margin of my paper. A couple weeks later, when I was studying for an exam, I saw those notes, rewrote them onto their own piece of paper. And lo and behold, I was an English major. And I was like, that looked like a poem. That looks a lot like a poem. I'm an English major. I should know, I guess. So, So then, I don't know, over the course of the next couple of weeks, I wrote 2 more poems, and I kind of shared that with a friend who outed me in the student center to like the director of the student center who needed a student to come and perform some type of art, you know, as on the last minute. And my friend was like, Vernell's a poet. And she was like, Vernell, come tomorrow and read your poems. I was like, I only have 3 poems. She was like, that's fine. Just come. I need a student. So the next day I went to a weekly event on my campus at the time, read my 3 poems, people clapped, and then we drunk tea and ate pastries.
How about that? A 3-poem feature right out the gate.
3-poem feature right out the gate. I'd never shared a poem in public before ever to anyone, just right out the gate.
Wow, that's great. And can you tell us just a little bit about how with you it was like reading poetry and simultaneously organizing
Yeah.
came at the same time. So
Yes.
tell us about that experience.
Yes. Around the same time. It was in the same, I think pretty much the same semester. I had become a member of my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta, and one of our areas that we're really supportive in is arts and letters. And so, along with the other programming that the chapter was doing, I started planning arts and letters programming. And since I had this newly discovered, you know, knack for writing poetry, I would organize poetry readings like kind of each semester for my chapter, and we would invite our professors who were poets, other students who were poets. You know, it would be kind of, and I had never before then, other than in college, I had never been to a poetry reading, so I wasn't even sure what they were supposed to look like. I knew people would just take turns reading poems, right? And looking back on that now, I'm so you know, blessed that the professors humored my invitation to come, you know, and share their share their poems with us. But yeah, and so just very, and that was very shortly after my first little poetry reading. So still in my infancy as a poet, I started doing that, you know, organizing these events on campus. So my development as a poet, you know, was really tied to very early my ability, willingness, even pleasure of creating spaces for other poets to come and share.
That's great, Vernell. That's very I love that. I just love that story that like you were just thrust into this whole scene like, "Ma, here I am. I mean, this is it. This is what we're gonna do."
Right, right.
And you did it. But you did it. But you did it.
Exactly. But I did it. And that university, Denison University, was such a great place for me to like, you know, explore this new passion of mine. You know, one of the things that was so pivotal to me in those early years is that at some point before I graduated, Gwendolyn Brooks came to campus, you know, to do a poetry reading and to do like, you know, master's classes with some of the creative writing majors. Um, and I remember I was not in any of the creative writing classes, but yet there I was, a poet, you know, or a poet in the making, you know, and she was still so very gracious to me, still like extremely kind to me when I got the chance to meet her. At that point, I did not know that our paths would cross later, years later, and she would be even more gracious to me, and generous with me at that point. And so she just was just amazing. And other poets that I've met along the way too, Nikki Giovanni, she's my sorority sister, and I've had the pleasure of meeting her a few times. And that was really awesome too. I remember even when I was very young in poetry, I like even wrote her a letter and she wrote me back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's great. Nikki
yeah,
Giovanni and
yeah,
Gwendolyn Brooks. You know, I know both of those names. So I know that that experience had to be
yeah.
just really uplifting and profound for you. So, yeah. Wow, mind blown.
Listen here, mine too, mine blown. Yeah.
Yeah, so now I want to segue a little bit into how you met Is Said,
Oh yeah.
and how that really, really began to propel you on this
Yeah.
whole course of poetry and organizing and all the things that you've done. So tell us about that.
Yeah, brother Is Said, may he rest in peace. Just a cultural icon, elder to the community, and was really so instrumental in the development and shaping of the local poetry at large, and especially amongst Black poets. And so I met him when I after coming to Columbus, and I'm about to date myself now. In the spring of 1994, I was only 3 years old. I'm kidding. Coming to Columbus to go to grad school at Ohio State, and I went to a poetry reading here in town in Columbus, and it was not a good time. It was not a good time. I cried like those folks. It was such a ice cold greeting. Did not feel welcome in that space at all. And just really mean, kind of mean,
Mm,
kind of rude, kind of mean. And I was just like, oh man, I am never going to another reading in this town. What is this town on? And so I had kind of written that off, but would, still write poems, in my graduate school dorm room. And then one day, I was in the Frank W. Hale Jr. Black Cultural Center at Ohio State and saw a poster for an event called Poetry in the Winter. And Brother Is Said had a poetry reading for each season: poetry in the winter, poetry in the spring, poetry in the fall. And they were at different places, but poetry in the winter was always at OSU in the cultural center, the Black Cultural Center. And I saw that and I said, oh, I'm going to go to that. I'm thinking, oh, if this is in the Black Cultural Center, then chances are it's going to have poets, and poetry lovers that look like me. And maybe I won't have the same experience that I had at that other reading where nobody looked like me. And so I went to it, and Brother Is Said was running it. He had this amazing woman. Oh, she's so darling and so sweet. At the time, she was a newscaster. Her name is Charlene Brown. She's now on, I think, after newscaster, she eventually was hosting one of the shows on WOSU. Just amazing, sweet woman, was the MC for the event. And I went, there was a featured poet. I don't remember who that featured poet was, but I remember it said, it was like, you a poet, sign up for this open mic. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I was a little shy due to my previous experience in town. And he was like, no, young sister, I'm putting your name down. What's your name? And just real, like he was, I don't know, my uncle or something, or my dad, or, granddad, or so, I don't, just family. And he just immediately, it said, just immediately felt like family. And so I read on the open mic. It was, I mean, just the welcoming, spirit that he had to me, and he didn't even know me. It just kind of melted away whatever cold reception I had previously got at another reading. Just made me feel really welcomed and appreciated. Like my presence was appreciated. And so he then introduced me to other poets in town, other Black poets in town, invited me out to different readings in town. And so that's when I started venturing off of the campus area and into other places in Columbus, and then engaging with poetry outside of the university area, and experiencing poetry outside of the academy, right? Poetry that people were writing about their experiences, about their real life experiences, you know. And that really was like a life lesson. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in Black studies. And uh, being a poet definitely took many courses in Black literature, and so it was as if I was like seeing some of the lessons that I had learned coming to life, like when you talk about poetry, particularly in political movements like the Black Arts movement happening kind of in conjunction with Black Power and civil rights movement, and those poets speaking and writing about their existence and their lives and their impressions. And so it's like once I left that OSU area and started engaging with people in the community and listening to poets in the community, and I'm like, man, their poetry sounds more like my poetry. Their poetry is about something. Their poetry is speaking to their lived experiences, and that's what I thought poetry should be doing. That's what my poetry was doing for me, is that it was reflective of my lived experiences. And so Brother It said just opened up a whole new world to me. And yeah, and then a few years later, he gave me my first experience in hosting a reading in town when I got to host one of his, I think it was Poetry in the Spring, I think, Poetry in the Spring. And I got to host it. And I was like, what? It's like my first time since college, since undergrad. I take that back. Not my first time in the community hosting, because I had hosted some things on OSU's campus. But yeah, it was my first time in the community hosting, and it
So
was,
where was that at in the community when you hosted that?
you know what? Ironically, it was in a building that later became Snaps and Taps.
Whoa.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
about that? And
yeah,
so now you were beginning to experience this whole community thing that
yeah,
came along with poetry and
yeah,
Black arts.
yeah.
So and the embracing,
Oh
you
yeah,
being
yeah,
embraced and all of
yeah,
that, as opposed to
yeah.
that first read. I'm so glad you didn't stop at that first reading,
You know what?
Vernell.
I thank God for It Said. Whenever I look back on my experiences in Columbus, I thank God for It Said. You know, and I'm not the only poet who can say that. I'm not the only poet who's grateful for It Said's either direct influence or indirect in influence. Um, and so yeah, so I'm very thankful. And because he also blended music and dance and stuff with his poetry, I was also able to see how multiple forms of art can speak to each other in real time. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's really great. And so now, and this segues just right good, as far as because you already mentioned snaps and taps. So
Yeah.
we want to go into the whole writer's block and
Yeah.
how you and Scott came to know each other and begin writer's block poetry night. So let's talk about that.
It looks like
Well,
Ryan wants to get in here. Go
Get
ahead,
in,
Ryan.
jump in, Ryan.
Jump in, Ryan.
I've heard, I think it was with Steve, maybe it was Louise as well, but I've heard Snaps and Taps a couple times. Was that a bar or a venue or like what?
Yeah, it was a venue, and the best way that I think I could describe it is like a art house, like a yeah, like it was an art venue, an art and cultural venue. Let me say that. And I think that's the best way to describe it. Before that building was Snaps and Taps, it had housed a Black owned theater company called
Okay.
Living the Dream Theater. Living the Dream Theater was owned by this brother named James Chapman. And I had met him through some mutual friends. He was a playwright and a poet. A lot of his plays were choreo poems, and And so his company was on the road a lot doing college shows. And so he wanted to have a local season. So he got this leased this building and housed his theater company in there to do local seasons when they weren't on the road doing college shows, you know. And while in town, he had a poetry night too, because he was a poet. So he loved poetry. So he had an open mic poetry. And I found my way there with some mutual friends, with some friends who had introduced me to what Brother Chapman was doing. And I started coming to the open mic. And when it was like the end of summer one year. And to say what year it was would I don't know. If I had to guess what year it was, it might have been somewhere around 98, maybe, right?
Ooh.
You know, somewhere around there, give or take a year. And it all runs together after a
Right.
while. But I remember it was prior to 2000. I remember, and so they were getting ready to go on the road for their college season because school was back in session. They were getting ready to go on the road for their college tour, the whole theater company. But he wanted to keep the open mic going because so many local people were coming out to that Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. Right?
Okay.
Sound familiar? That's where it came from.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And so uh and so he asked me if I would host it. And I was like, yeah, sure. No problem. Yep. And so every Wednesday, poets would come in and I would host this reading. And one day, Scott Woods came in with a bunch of poems in his journal or whatever. And so yeah. And he read this poem that made everybody. I will not say the name of the poem. He will not kill me. He will not have words with me. But knock everybody's socks off. Everybody, was like, who is this guy? Who is he? What's that? That was amazing. Who is he? And I'm like, what? Now, I think when he tells a story, he says that I was being really snooty. He said, he did, I was real snooty back in the day or
Oh,
something.
right, or mean, because he likes to ask if when people say they met Vernell, was she mean to you when you first met her?
He says that he first met me at OSU. I don't remember this, but he says I was being sorority girl mean to him when we first met up at OSU. I do not remember that. I do not remember that at all. I do not remember that. But yeah. So and then they like Thursday nights they would have featured artists. Like Wednesday night was open mic, and then Thursday they would have like some featured artists. So I was like, hey, can I book this guy Scott Woods to do a feature reading on a Thursday? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, great, it's gonna be great. He packed that room out. It was standing room only. Like people were sweating listening to him do his thing. It was amazing, and we've been friends ever since. He's my brother. I love him. And then it was also too around that time. So eventually the city of Columbus could not sustain a Black-owned theater.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the city wasn't ready for it yet or something. I don't know. So Brother Chapman let the venue go, let the building go, and continue to focus on the college touring of his company.
Okay.
Simultaneously to that, though, I started hosting. I was like playing little poetry events up on campus, even
Okay.
in the lobby of my dorm.
Creative.
Creative. I would always get Scott. Everything I did, I would always make sure Scott was a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, this is I was shout out to this sister Lynn Logan Grimes, who now works at the Ohio History Center. She was at the Columbus Museum of Art at the time, and so I would just volunteer with her and help plan poetry events at the Columbus Museum of Art, called Poetic Fusion, and would include Scott in that as well. He was so as a poetry organizer, I would always want to include him because he was just a really amazing poetry. He was a really amazing poet. He wrote great poetry, but even then, what I guess could be considered like early years of him being a poet, he has such a voice and a keen perspective that he brought to his poetry that if I was planning an event, I would want him to be a part of it, you know? And and so like kind of like all this was happening around the same time, you know. And while, you know, Living a Dream was kind of ending their stay in that venue, this brother named Todd Tooney and crew was having weekend events and leasing space over on Mount Vernon on the weekends and having these like parties. It would be like jazz bands, singers, poets, you
Wow.
know, and all of that was happening simultaneously, but it was like really not a spot of their own. They were just coming into the spot on the weekend. And so next thing I know, like I didn't really know him then. Next thing I know, him and his crew had leased out that same building, 44 South Washington, um, which was just not even a block from the Columbus Museum of Art on South Washington, and which was the same place where Living a Dream Theater had been, where I had also been hosting that reading. And he came in there and brought his operation there. So then he's programming not just the weekends, but programming on for Thursdays, for Wednesdays, you know, and all of that. And he wanted a poetry night to happen, you know, and so he went to Brother Iset and said, because I mean, Iset was the man with poetry. Iset was the man, and said, "Hey, Brother Iset, can you host a weekly open mic here in my spot at Snaps and Taps?" And it said, "Oh no, brother, I'm too old for that. No, 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 no. You need to get this young sister Vernell. If you want somebody to host that open mic, you got to get this young sister Vernell to do that. You got to get her to do that, you know." And so he came to me and asked if I would do it, and I was sure. So then started doing that, and so now I'm doing that. And you know, Scott's coming every week because we're friends, brothers, you know, siblings, and he's coming, and then other poets start showing up. So it was in that space, Snaps and Taps, that I met so many of the artists that are near and dear to me still to this day here, you know, in Columbus. You know, that's where I met Kim Braswell. She came in one day, Dr. Sidney Jones Jr. That's where we met Mark Lomax, Dr. Mark Lomax, jazz composer and genius. You know, that's where I met Parnell Willoughby, now of Willoughby Soul Veg, but he has a deep roots in art and hip hop, right?
Wow.
And so that's where I met him and his brothers and so many other artists at the time, like BHB and Storm, you know, all of these amazing artists, you know. Um, this brother Hassan, may he rest in visual artist, amazing, you know. So many jazz musicians, you know, some of the greatest jazz musicians. That's where I met them, you know, right there at Snaps and Taps, because it was all
Wow.
going down there. Poetry, jazz, other live bands, visual artists, because there was a gallery space where artists could display their works. I mean, and so this was when I really like, oh yeah, I was really like hitting my stride as like an event organizer, was loving it, you know, and really starting to blossom as a poet also, you know. Yeah.
Good, because it sounds like, and it just feels like it was like fertile ground, like the
Yes.
soil was just what it needed to be to help people grow or to help this thing grow. And Vernell, and the more that I listen to you, the more that I know for sure you were the right person to start this off with, because you have really, Vernell, you have such the way of bringing in the history of how this poetry scene, and then you even brought in like the other arts, you know, because it's all art,
Yes.
it's just in different forms, and how everybody was mingling and melding together. So I just love it. Can you talk to us a little bit about, so in this organizing thing, you guys ended up being in slams.
Yes, 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 yes,
And
yes, yeah. So I, I would, I would tell a story one way. Scott Woods would tell it another, I'm sure. But yeah, it was while we were at Snaps and Taps, like while during our stay there, that we put together. He put together. I can't even say we. He put together first slam teams representing Columbus. We were doing did Rust Belt Regional Poetry Slam. The first team went to the National Poetry Slam. You know, it was there at Snaps that we also met the great Rose Smith. Oh my goodness. Oh, love Rose Smith. Met her. And so in the beginning, I was not involved in Poetry Slam. I would be supportive of the poetry. Of course, sometimes I would even host or MC them. Like if Scott, was in them, I would host or MC them. And in the beginning, in the beginning, I MC'd that open mic, but then at some point we flip flopped, Scott and I, and he started hosting regularly, and so I would cheerlead the slams, yay, go, but I would never slam. I was like philosophically opposed to poetry slam, philosophically opposed, And I remember one day I walked in and there was a slam that night, and Scott made me slam. He was like, Vernell, he said, "You gonna be in this slam?" I said, "No, I'm never in a slam. I never do that. I don't come with my poetry like that." He was like, "Why won't you in a slam?" I said, "Because I've never been in a." He says, "The fact that you've never done something is not the reason to never try. So you're in it, writing your name down." Okay. I still remember. I don't have the poem, I don't think, but I still remember the poem, what the poem was about that I used in that slam. I still remember that. You know, it was about Vanetta Flowers, who had become the first Black person to win a gold medal in the Winter Olympics.
oh,
She was a sprinter who turned into a bobsledder, and so yeah. But anyway, so that started happening. I don't know. I can't remember what year that was, but there were teams going to Rust Belt Regional Poetry Slam, National Poetry Slam for several years before I ever got involved in poetry. I would do like a little local slam here or there with, no expectation of ever making a team, wasn't even a goal of mine, you know. Um and um and then I remember Rose Smith took me with her to a national poetry slam in Minnesota. I think it was in Minneapolis or St. Paul. And we were watching these competitions and everything, and she was like, "Oh, I could never see myself doing this." Girl, me neither. And a couple years later, Rose is like top 10 poet in the country, like jumping into the slams. And then eventually I did too. A few years after her, I jumped on in there too, you know, and had a good time, and then I was
yeah.
hooked.
So a slam is like, so do you have to memorize your poetry when you're slamming, or no?
No, it depends on
So
who
in
you
the
are.
score, like, by, is there judges, or is it the
Yes,
audience, or
yes. In the traditional poetry slam, five judges are picked from the audience randomly. You know, they give scores from 0 to 10, drop the high, drop the low, add the three in the middle. 3-minute time limit. If you go over 3 minutes and 10 seconds, you're getting points deducted. No props, nothing like that.
woo,
People
just pressure, the pressure.
it was a pressure. Yeah, those national events was a pressure cooker for real, because they lasted over the course of several days, and you're like, oh my good. I mean, the pressure was real. Yeah, yeah. And in terms of memorizing, I always learned my poems so I wouldn't need paper. Scott never is a wonderful example of somebody who never memorized a poem. He always read off of paper and always did well. Always did well, but yeah, so it was just. And so we eventually had to leave Snaps and Taps. We kind of got put out, and and that was while we trace our history of writer's block goes back to Snaps and Taps. We didn't start using the name writer's block until after we left Snaps and Taps.
Okay, so where did you go next?
We ended up in this place that was like a bar. It was like a bar, like a restaurant bar on South High Street, kind of catty corner, just a block before you got to the Franklin County Courthouse. So
Okay.
writer's block was not a reference to the condition people have when they think they can't write.
Mhm.
It was related to, like cell block D,
Okay,
writer's block, like D block, like C block, like
I got you.
writer's block. And if you ever looked at the logo for writer's block, it was Edgar Allan Poe behind bars,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
because of our location of where we were when we came up with the name at that time, right?
Yep.
It was like this restaurant was like right next door to like a bail bondsman office, maybe
Yes,
in between two bail bondsman offices, so it was that kind of theme, like that writer's block, play on words, right?
right.
Yeah. And so we weren't there that long because uh there was one Wednesday we showed up along with the bartender employee, and the place was locked down. All of the furniture was gone. In a week, this place had disappeared.
And-
And even the employee did not know, the staff member did not know.
Oh,
Found out
wow.
when we found out. Yeah. So, and then we bounced around to a couple other places. We ended up in a place at the time. It was called Barrister Hall, but it was the venue right next to High Beck. That's on the corner of High and Beck. It's like a venue right next door. It was called
Yeah.
Barrister Hall at that point. We were upstairs there. Then we left, went to a cafe on Gay Street downtown.
Mhm.
Then left there and then went to the place that used to be the Miss Music Hall. And we were there for a number of years. And then from the music hall, we ended up at our beloved Cafe Kerouac.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah. And by the time we get to Cafe Kerouac, it's like about 2006 or 2007 when we landed at Cafe Kerouac, and we stayed there until Writer's Block open mic came to a close in December of
Wow.
24 years.
yeah,
20,
Wow.
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
24 year. And even you all even kept it up during the pandemic when people couldn't meet.
Right.
Writers
We were
Block met via Zoom
That's right. We sure did.
every
We
Wednesday.
every Wednesday met via Zoom. And and we thought about, like, is this the end? With when the pandemic happened, is this the end? No, it's not the end, because it deserved a better ending than the pandemic, right?
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
because of all, I mean, so and because you guys developed a community. So let's talk about that, the development of
Yes.
the community. And I remember when we talked to you before, you had talked about a poetic emergency person. So if you could weave that in there, but yeah, just talk about how
Yeah.
um
Yeah. Yeah.
you guys developed a community or kept a community going that really seemed to have started with when you met Brother Ized, and so you understood about
Well, you know
community.
what? I mean, I understood about community and the role of community supporting the arts in general, right? The big
Hmm.
community supporting the arts. But, you know, when I look back on that, I was not trying to develop a community around writers. That was not
Hmm.
what I was trying to do. I can't speak for Scott, but I don't think that was what he was trying. We were just trying to give people a nice place, consistent place, a welcoming and open place to share their poetry where people of all walks of life can come in, share their poetry. And at some point along the way, especially after we got to Cafe Kerouac, where we started to see a community around writer's block developing, like
Mm.
specific to writer's block. It was the first time, well, in my memory, that I started seeing people coming out from week and expecting to see the same other people from week to week. In other venues, people would come out regularly, but maybe not week to week, and may not have always been the interaction between different groups of people that would come out, but or if there was, I just wasn't tuned into it and didn't notice it because I was too busy working. But we started to see this community developing around writer's block. And then and then there were other readings that were launched by people who started at writer's block. And that was also a beautiful thing, for such a benefit to the city and the community. But yeah, so we started having poets coming out, like poets were meeting at writer's block and getting married to each other and having babies. And
So it
you
just
know,
kind of organically happened. The community
yeah,
organically
it just organically happened. Friendships were being developed. People started getting together outside of Wednesday night, whether they were going to dinner or going to party, or hey, let's all get together and play kickball. And those kinds of things was starting to develop. People were making friends, at writer's block. And I think that is just such a wonderful thing. Absolutely wonderful thing.
It
Wonderful
is.
thing.
It's a testament to, even though that wasn't you all's intent with
Yeah.
doing it. Your intent was so people could have a space to come and read their poetry, or hear poetry. If that maybe that's the only
Hmm.
experience you wanted, hear poetry. But then this organic thing just began to happen, and I think it's a testament to
Yeah.
the welcoming
Yes.
that welcoming environment, because anybody could come. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? You could
Yes.
come. If you felt like you had a poem, you could read your poem, and nobody was going to boo you, even if they thought it was boo.
Right.
Nobody was going to boo you. You were going
Right.
to get at least some claps. You know what I'm saying? You were going, and so you were going to be encouraged. So
Yes.
that's probably what contributed to that. And so it's still that whole thing to me, like the soil, like it was just there and it was being tilled and overturned and it was being nourished, and that was there. And so it's a testament to yourself and to Scott. And then later Louise joined you all, and just
Yeah.
having that space available like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I
good.
I like to think so, because I certainly put a lot of effort into making people feel welcome. I didn't want anybody to feel the way I felt when I went to my first poetry reading in Columbus. Like,
Yes.
and so am making everybody feel welcome. I don't care what you look like, who you are, welcome. Come in,
Welcome.
share, whatever.
Right. Just be in the atmosphere. Just be in the atmosphere. That is so wonderful. So I'm gonna give this over to Ryan and let him ask you some questions,
Right,
Vernell.
because I
'Cause
know
I've been
because
running
Ryan's
my
been
mouth all night. You like, golly, what is Ryan? Just he's arm candy for Marquita tonight, or what?
I know, right? Just a pretty face and a
Maybe now we're gonna bring in the jazz trio, or
right.
Well,
I'm
I
gonna
could work
take
with
this
that.
as an opportunity to have some pineapple juice.
That sounds like a good place for us all to take a little break. But before we go, a poem. Because what is a show about poets without a little poetry? Cotton Candy on a Rainy Day by Nikki Giovanni. Don't look now, I'm fading away into the gray of my mornings or the blues of every night. Is it that my nails keep breaking, or maybe the corn on my second little piggy, things keep popping out on my face or of my life? It seems no matter how I try, I become more difficult to hold. I am not an easy woman to want. They have asked the psychiatrists, psychologists, politicians and social workers, what this decade will be known for, there is no doubt, it is loneliness. Thank you for joining us today on our first episode of Poems and Potions, and a very special thank you to Dr. Vernell Bristow for being our first poet. You can catch part 2 of her interview in a few weeks. We hope you'll join us there. Opening and closing music provided by Charity Dietrich. Sound support provided by A.D. Dietrich. Poems and Potions is produced by Dr. Amanda Arcath, Marquita Byers, and yours truly, R. Taryn Lear.